Hello, Netrunners. I'm back with another Professor video, and I'm up against the Foundry. When analyzing my opening and mulligan hands, you notice that there are only a few cards that I really want to see. Aesop's Pawnshop, Katie Jones, and of course, Show Gamble, and Diesel as well. These make up 12 of my 45 cards. If I can see at least one in my opening hand, I think it's average, if not above average already. So my opening hand only contains one Aesop's Pawnshop. There's Quality Time, which is good card draw, but a Quality Time with 2 credits remaining in my bank is not going to end very well for me. My mulligan hand is much better because it has Aesop's combined with Lamprey, so I can install the Lamprey, run HQ. Even if it doesn't hit, I can always uninstall it with Aesop's for a gain of 2 credits. So my mulligan hand isn't the best, at least it's something, as opposed to my opening hand, where all the cards are pretty useless unless the Corp decides to stupidly not ice up R&D on the first turn, which, that would be a really silly thing to do. So he doesn't ice up R&D, he doesn't ice up HQ, and I get my big reward. Lamprey into 3 straight HQ runs. So I see a hedge fund. Well, you can't play that anymore. You should have played it on your first turn, huh? And a priority rack, which I steal immediately. And I don't have to worry about seesaws or punitive counter-strike because he is poor. So he's down to 2 credits, and I'm a very happy runner. Until I see what he has in store for me. Sweet Sweep into hedge fund, and then a protection on HQ. Well, that's a pretty good recovery, I must admit. So I install the Aesops and I run Jackson. I don't have a choice here. I'm forced to run. Hopefully he reshuffles stuff, which he ends up doing, which is good for me. I need to force the Jackson off the board because that will only make accelerated beta tests easier for him to pull off. Yes, he can use the Foundry's ability to save him from an accelerated beta test, but if he finds 2 pieces of ice with ABT and he wants to rest them both, with Jackson he can safely do so. Alright, because I played so many cards from my hand, I was able to Quality Time and then install Sahasrara and not have to worry about discarding any of my cards in my hand. So, but now I'm pretty poor, so that's a problem. But I have a very evil plan in mind. Can you see it? First, I diesel up and I play the Origami to make sure that I don't have to discard anything from hand. Once again, Origami is that useful. If not for the Origami, I would probably have trashed my Cerberus, the green one, as it is the lowest priority and can be rescued with recursion later. But can you see what I'm going to do the next turn? This is going to be something creative. First, before the Corp starts their turn, I install Lamprey with Clone Chip to get a 1 free credit from Sahasrara. Then I Aesops off Origami as I no longer need it, and then play Sneak Door Beta as the first click, and I get to run 3 times. So I'm really sucking his bank dry. From 9 credits, he's down to 6 credits. Unfortunately, my accesses were a pretty big failure. I saw a Victor 2.0 and the Biotic Labor I saw twice. With no imp in hand or deck, imp in hand or in my archives, I cannot do anything about that. So next turn, I Sneak Door once again. I knew that would be a Victor. I want to force him to res it, make sure he loses 5 credits, and I can still click through it. And I see a Biotic Labor. My last click was a toss-up between R&D and HQ. I decided to go for HQ because this would force him to lose yet another credit. So this is really an anarchistic professor, but it's really paying off. The credit denial is very powerful, and it has slowed down his game massively. He was forced to spend 3 consecutive clicks his next turn, clearing virus counters just to wipe Lamprey off the board. That was a huge victory for me. A 1-cost program causing so much trouble for him. I came out on top here. Who needs Nerf Agent when you have a Lamprey that threatens so much disruptive power? Well, but that's over now because my Lamprey is back in my heap and I have no form of recursion to fetch it back. So that will have to go for now. In the meantime, I Quality Time up into an Imp, so I'm now able to trash his Sansan, which I saw from earlier. Unfortunately, now I have lost my Origami. Remember that I Aesop's Pawnshop it earlier. As a result, I'm forced to trash one of my Cerberuses. Here I make the mistake of trashing the red Cerberus instead of the green Cerberus. Actually, it's not a mistake. That is a pretty decent move because I can fetch it back with clone chip during a run in case I encounter a destroyer. Alright, so yeah, if the red Cerberus was in my hand, I wouldn't be able to tutor it during a run, so that's pretty important to note. In the meantime, I continue aggressively running his servers, knowing that there's a Biotic label in his hand, and I found it, so I'm sniping it off with Imp. This was very important. I want to make sure that he doesn't get a free ABT off, because the moment he starts raising ice, my game becomes much harder. I'm now placing maximum pressure on him while his ice are still mostly unresed. Unfortunately, he can afford to res the next bronze that's sitting over R&D. So that's a problem. But I draw into my blue Cerberus, and that solves everything. The next turn, a quality time leads into a mass install because I found so many cheap cards to install. A Sahasrara, a Data Sucker, and a Scheherazade. All three install at once. And it cost me nearly nothing. In fact, I think I gained credits from that because I hosted the Sahasrara and Data Sucker on top of the Scheherazade to gain 2 credits. So this is my economic backbone all set and ready to go. This is looking fantastic for me. I don't have many burst economy cards, but now with 2 Sahasraras set up and a Scheherazade on the board, I can easily install programs for free and trash them when I no longer need them. This is the state where I want to be. This is, yes, things are going to start looking good for me. Unfortunately, things are also starting to look good for him because he has an Adonis rest. So I need to look out for that. I'm getting money, but he's also getting money. First, install blue Cerberus so that I can threaten R&D lock. That's a Biotic label. I can't trash it, unfortunately. Imp has run out. It is possible to sack my clone chip to retrieve the Imp and run again. I'll do so later. First, I will attempt to challenge his money server. Let's see what sort of ice he has over there. Hope it's not a destroyer. Thankfully, all he has to stop me is next silver, which I can easily bounce off of. And now here's the problem. When I created, this was still in my old iteration of my Professor deck. There was no Parasite in this deck. That's a huge problem. I definitely should be running Parasite because of Nyx Ice. Nyx Ice completely shuts down Cerberuses. Imagine if I have to run through 4 or 5 subroutine Nyx Silvers or 4 or 5 Strength Nyx Bronzes for each single access. That's not worth it at all. And against the Foundry, they'll assemble that very quickly. So it's a huge problem. I definitely need to include Parasite in my deck. It only costs 1 deck space. And it helps against so much ice other than the next suite. So that is something I definitely learned the hard way from this game. In the meantime, I continue drawing up. I find a Sure Gamble, which is nice, but first I need to continue threatening R&D lock. I was hoping for a medium here. I know there's a medium in my deck. I need to fetch it somehow. That would be very crucial because that would really force him to ice up R&D. Right now he's just protecting his scoring server and his HQ. I do fetch the Imp. And I see a Mother Goddess. This Imp was fetched right before I made a successful run. Because I couldn't find my medium, my next best option is to go with the Imp, which allows me to run R&D and see multiple cards in one turn. So that was a hedge fund. Unfortunately, he's going to get really rich. So at this point, the credit denial strategy breaks down. I still won't complain. It slowed him down so much in the early game. As I said, if I'm able to force out a virus purge just for a 1-cost virus, I'm winning handily. So no complaints there, but now it's time to forget about credit denial and go all in instead on multi-access. So there you saw me digging for my medium. I couldn't find it. All I found was money and lots of Katie Jones, which I don't really need at this point because my programs are doing all the work for me, giving me all the credits I need. So now, let's see. It's my turn. He installs something in the remote. I know I can contest it. Question is, do I want to contest it? I decide not to. At the start of every turn, I must ask myself, do I want to pawn off anything? It's very tempting to pawn off the duplicate Aesop Sponge, Sahasrara, to pawn off the Data Sucker. I don't know. I should have pawned off the Saraswara because I ended up drawing into more programs and didn't have the memory unit to install them. Remember that all the stuff that's hosted on Sherazade do take up MU, so I'm already at my limit. I finished my turn by playing all the programs out of my hand, so I wouldn't have to discard any. This deck does not want to discard programs, unlike my earlier iteration of Freelance Coding Professor. I like programs in the heap, but if they're in the heap, they must be because of ESOPs. I want money from them. And Astrolabe is finally paying off. He's forced to score in the new server, which tells me that the card in his remote seems to be an Adonis, some sort of asset. If it's an upgrade, he can just score from that server. So because he scored a Director Haas's pet project, he gets to retrieve a Sansan, City Grid, an Adonis campaign, and a piece of ice and put it in a new server. That is threatening to me. I need to act on it as soon as possible. Now, my first reaction here is I know that that piece of ice is not a code gate. He wouldn't throw a code gate that I can easily break with Blue Cerberus into that server. So what I do here is to sack my Blue Cerberus and sack the Data Sucker as well using ESOPs. Then I scavenge the Blue Cerberus for a different colored Cerberus, the red Cerberus. I accidentally deleted my Sherazade while doing so. A little mistake there. But rectified pretty quickly. So now I can break sentries and I can break barriers as well as I play the green Cerberus from my hand. So as long as it's not a code gate, I'm getting through that server. So I run through, and does he res the ice? Does he res? No res. Alright, fantastic. So I trash the Adonis normally, and I'm definitely not going to pay 5 credits for a Sansan, so I'm going to trash that with Imp instead. That's a big win for me. Playing the 2 other Cerberuses without him expecting it was a big deal for me. But here I made a crucial mistake. I ran HQ knowing that he fetched a next bronze earlier on. Huge mistake. That is going to cost me a lot of money because the rest of the next ice are pumped up to 3 subroutines or 3 strength. And it turns out that the card in that secure remote was a Bifrost array. So he re-triggered Director Haas's pet project. Sansan is back on the board. I wasted my Imp and my 3 credits to no avail. That pissed me off. But there's nothing much I can do about it. At least it's giving me free card draw with Astrolabe, but that's pretty much the only benefit. So, now I'm in a bit of a pickle. The next bronzes are guarding the most important servers, so I was forced to scavenge the cache, the emptied out cache, for my Blue Cerberus, which was lying in my archives, my heap, so that I can threaten a central access next turn. In the meantime, he reses the Adonis from his remote server. So now he's looking pretty good. He's actually catching up with me in agenda points. Even though I've gotten lots of accesses in the early game, I've really tapered off as I struggled to build up my rig of the multicolored Cerberuses. And as a result, he's actually building up a lot of ice. He's playing very horizontally, which is a good thing for me. I don't want him to stack next bronzes all on the same server, but on the same token, I need to close this game out quickly before he puts even more ice on the centrals. So, I finally find my medium. I use Jin to tutor my medium because I can't wait for it anymore. I play it out and I make a run on my 3rd click. The first click was tutor medium, second click was install medium, and my 3rd click running through, I see 2 code gates. That is very bad news. My Blue Cerberus is going to be taxed to oblivion. And to make things worse, it will strain my credit pool because it's a toll booth that will cost 3 credits to break in addition to the 4 credits using Blue Cerberus. Now, of course, I have an easy solution for toll booth in my deck. It's called David. Unfortunately, it's still lying in my stack. One of 9 cards remaining in my stack. I can't afford to continue drawing. He's playing pretty quickly and he will get to 7 agenda points pretty soon if I don't stop him. So I need a way to maintain pressure whilst not making it too taxing on my credits or my Blue Cerberus, which is running out of power tokens very quickly. I only have 1 more scavenge left in my hand. So another thing I'm thinking of is I can use a Stim Hack in my hand to get through R&D once for cheap, The problem with that is I cannot afford to have the brain damage snipe off my scavenge. I need the recursion badly. So what I do first, run R&D to see uh, 2 cards. Paying through my teeth, using unloading KT and paying through my teeth to get through. Then I use the scavenge on the blue Cerberus. So now, yes, now that the scavenge is out of my hand, now that I've used it to refresh my blue Cerberus, I can use Steam Hack. But now's not the time. Now I want to draw and I find the David. Perfect. Couldn't have come at a better time. And I do have space to host the David. It can be hosted on Jin because it is not an icebreaker. So that's the good news. And this means that the one Sahasrara on my board will remain there until I finish installing my David. David will be the last program that I need to complete my rig, after which I can trash Sahasrara. So on my next turn, I do not want to play the David just yet. That would spoil the supplies for him. So instead of playing David and wasting my turn, I instead spend my turn running Archives, forcing his Jackson out. So if he pulls out my ABT, at least he'll be forced to make a tough choice. In the meantime, he does score an agenda with the Sansan that he pulled out earlier on. I can't contest it anymore. Thankfully, all he got was a profiteering, and he wisely chose not to trigger it. Giving me bad pub at this point is a very huge mistake. So I find my David, I install it, and then I perform a Steam Hack run. With so many credits, obviously, I'm going to use Blue Cerberus to break through both ice and pay the toll. And I get to access Hedge Fund, Bifrost Array. Okay, at least that puts me on 4 points. He's running a lot of 1-point agendas. Unfortunately, I'm still far away from winning. So I just load up KT. I need KT's credits because each KT tab is allows me 1 run through R&D because of Tobu's toll. I ignored Sansan City Grid because he scored a profiteering off it earlier on. This tells me that his the best agenda that he had in his hand was a profiteering, which is pretty lousy at this point. He didn't even trigger it, so it's a blank 3-1 at this point. This tells me he doesn't have an accelerated beta test, so I don't have to worry about letting him score agendas off Sansan. The worst it could be is a Vitruvius, which is a 3-2. But even then, he didn't score that. As long as I keep R&D locked, he's not going to see the light of day. And that's exactly what I do here. I take a credit, make sure I have enough credits to pay through R&D, and I run through using David this time. And I access an ABT and an Adonis. With 2 clicks left, I decided that he could purge virus counters at this point to completely screw me over. So I unloaded KT and went in for one final all-in run to access 5 cards, I believe. Yes, including 2 new cards, an ABT, and a Sweet Sweep that closes the game. Wow, what a game it was. Well, this is by no means a good indication of the performance of my Professor deck, simply because my opponent got very unlucky. He didn't manage to score a single accelerated beta test, which is the whole reason why you play Foundry, Jackson Howard, and Bifrost Array. He wasn't able to get any of that off, so he wasn't able to rest his big ice for free, which was a huge pity for him. Another huge problem for him is that he lost too much early game tempo thanks to my credit denial. And then he wasn't able to get any biotic labels going, which was the cheaper way of scoring agendas out. Because I was thrashing all of them with Imp. And then when Sansan finally arrived, it was way too late. At that point, I could afford to let his Sansans run and still hit his centrals very hard. I think it all came down to his central defense, which was way too weak. Had he stacked 3 next silvers or 3 next bronzes on either of the centrals, after seeing that I'm playing a Cerberus-based deck, that would severely cripple me, because I wouldn't be able to make 2 consecutive runs on the same server without having to refresh my Cerberus. So that's a very good way to counter a Cerberus-based deck. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to adapt to that, and as a result, he lost due to medium digging, which is still a very powerful threat today. On the flip side, I think something worth learning from his corp deck is the splash of Sweet Sweep for burst economy. HB is typically very weak early on, and I managed to exploit that to the fullest. However, he managed to bounce back quite a bit despite the first turn Lamprey using Sweet Sweep into Hedge Fund, and that is something that is really worth Erling from, because had it not been for the Lamprey, he would have catapulted straight into biotic range, into Sense City Grid range. That would allow him to fast advance an ABT anytime he wished, as long as he had the components in hand. That would lead to disaster for the runner. So yeah, thanks for watching Happy Net Running. Bye.